Porphyria's Lover by Robert Browning. The rain set early into night. The sullen wind was soon awake. It tore the elm tops down for spite, and did its worst to vex the lake. I listened with heart fit to break. When glided in Porphyria, straight she shut the cold out and the storm, and kneeled and made the cheerless grate blaze up, and all the cottage warm. Which done, she rose, and from her form withdrew the dripping cloak and shawl, and laid her soiled gloves by, and tied her hat, and let the damp hair fall. And last she sat down by my side and called me. When no voice replied, she put my arm about her waist, and made her smooth white shoulder bare, and all her yellow hair displaced and stooping, made my cheek lie there, and spread over all her yellow hair, murmuring how she loved me, she too weak for all her heart's endeavor to set its struggling passions free from pride, and vainer ties dissever, and give herself to me forever. But passion sometimes would prevail, nor could tonight's gay feast restrain a sudden thought of one so pale for love of her, and all in vain. So she was come through wind and rain. Be sure I looked up at her eyes, happy and proud. At last I knew Porphyria worshipped me. Surprise made my heart swell, and still it grew while I debated what to do. That moment she was mine, mine fair, perfectly pure and good. I found a thing to do, and all her hair in one long yellow string I wound 3 times her little throat around, and strangled her. No pain felt she. I'm quite sure she felt no pain. As a shut bud that holds a bee, I wearily oped her lids, again laughed the blue eyes without a stain. And I untightened next the tress about her neck. Her cheek once more blushed bright beneath my burning kiss. I propped her head up as before, only this time my shoulder bore her head, which droops upon it still. The smiling rosy little head, so glad it has its utmost will, that all it scorned at once is fled. And I, its love, am gained instead, Porphyria's love. She guessed not how her darling one wish would be heard. And thus we sit together now, and all night long we have not stirred, and yet God has not said a word. Porphyria's Lover, which first appeared as Porphyria in the Monthly Repository in January 1836, is the earliest and most shocking of Robert Browning's dramatic monologues. The speaker or thinker of the poem recounts how he killed his illicit lover Porphyria by strangling her with her own hair. He does so to keep her his forever, reliving his story to justify his actions and preserve the moment of her death. The simple language and precisely structured form of the 60-line poem, combined with its asymmetrical rhyming pattern, suggest a complex madness concealed beneath the speaker's outwardly calm manner and reasonable tone. The action of Porphyria's Lover unfolds through the recounting of the events of one night, culminating in the murder of Porphyria by the speaker of the poem. Because the story is not retold to an audience, but seems rather to be replayed in the mind of Porphyria's lover, it is somewhat inaccurate to refer to him as the poem's speaker, but most commentators refer to him as such. Browning masterfully builds up tension in the poem by gradually revealing to the reader, through details provided by the speaker, what has taken place. As it also becomes clear that the narrator is mad, it is up to the reader to decide to what extent to believe the speaker's statements. The poem is a dramatic monologue told by Porphyria's lover, who is never named in the poem. And like other Browning monologues, what is learned about this person is to be gained not merely from what he says about himself, but from what he does not say, and from a sense that his depiction of himself may not be completely trustworthy. The poem opens by setting the scene. It is raining and a storm is raging outside, and with it establishes the tone of the action that follows. Browning here uses a device called pathetic fallacy, in which something non-human is endowed with human intentions and feelings. The wind, the speaker explains, is sullen. It destroys the trees out of spite, and it deliberately tries to vex or anger the lake. The mood of the speaker is made clear when he explains that he listens to the storm raging outside with heart fit to break. He is suffering greatly over something, and the weather outside mirrors and intensifies his feelings. Porphyria enters the speaker's cottage, and immediately the tone of the poem changes. Throughout the poem, there are clear contrasts between Porphyria and her lover. She is described in terms of bright color. Her yellow hair, the fire she makes blaze up, her blue eyes and rosy face, while he is pale. She is active, he is passive. She is talkative and he is silent. She comes in after being with many other people, while he sits alone and isolated in his cottage. After she makes the fire, Porphyria rises and takes off her clothes that are wet and soiled from the storm. The poet makes clear that it is only after she has put the scene in order that she approaches her lover. It is learned that Porphyria unties her hat, lets her hair down, and last sat down by my side. She goes to her lover only after she has set her surroundings right. She then calls to him. The speaker does not respond to Porphyria's call after she sits next to him. The speaker does not even present himself as I, and the sense of his passivity is stressed once more when he says that no voice replied to her calls. Porphyria again is the active partner as she puts her arm around the speaker's waist and bares her shoulder to him. She proceeds to seduce him, moving her blonde hair from her shoulder, pressing his cheek against it, and then enfolding him in her long tresses. By modern standards, this description may not be considered sexually explicit, but in early Victorian poetry, this would be considered a daring and erotically charged scene. The fact that the woman dominates and controls the situation is, of course, unusual, and this aspect is made all the more shocking when it is learned in the next few lines that she is a married woman of a different social class than the speaker. The two of them are engaged in an illicit love affair. He explains that Porphyria murmurs to him how much she loves him, but he says she is too weak, despite wanting to very much to overcome her pride and follow her desire to be his forever. She cannot dissever or break her vainer ties. However, sometimes her passion overcomes her and she cannot help but come to her lover. Tonight, for example, she has left a gay feast to be with him. The picture of Porphyria in this section of the poem comes as a contrast to the description of her given earlier in the poem. In lines 6 through 15, the speaker presented a figure of a strong, forceful, dominant woman. Now he presents her as being weak and unable to do what she actually wants. It is clear that while the earlier portrayal of Porphyria is offered in objective terms, the speaker now presents how he sees his lover in light of his self-importance, frustration, and bitterness. Suddenly, the demeanor of the speaker changes, and it seems that all is well and he is happy. But it becomes clear again that what he describes is not presented objectively but from the recesses of his troubled mind. It becomes especially difficult to determine what to believe about the account he offers. He says that he looks up at Porphyria's eyes and they are happy and proud. He knows at that instant that Porphyria worships him. He is surprised and made proud by this realization, and his feelings intensify as he decides what he should do. He thinks that at that moment Porphyria is completely and utterly his, and not only that, but she is fair, perfectly pure and good. It suddenly occurs to him what he should do, and that thing he finds to do is to take her hair in one long yellow string and wind it 3 times around her neck, strangling her. There is no description at all of Porphyria's struggle or horror, and according to the speaker, she feels no pain. He insists upon this twice. The reader knows the events cannot have occurred exactly as the speaker presents them, that he gives the interpretation of those events shaped by his demented mind. After strangling and killing her, the speaker opens Porphyria's eyelids using a strange simile that is at once grotesque and oddly innocent. He lifts her dead lids as perhaps a child would who opens a flower that holds a bee. Again, her eyes indicate that she is happy. They are laughing and without a stain. An unusual occurrence indeed, since Porphyria is dead. The speaker then proceeds to loosen the hair from around Porphyria's neck and kiss her on the cheek, which blushes beneath his caress. Now he props her up and puts her head on his shoulder. He imagines that Porphyria shares in his joy of having stopped the passage of time in the exact moment in which her love for him is complete. This strange and disturbing depiction of what is happening is made all the more eerie by the fact that the speaker says that it is Porphyria's head drooped on his shoulder like a flower that has these thoughts and feelings. The last 5 lines of the poem show the speaker sitting still with his dead lover's head upon his shoulder as he reflects that Porphyria would never have guessed how her darling one wish to be with her lover forever would finally be granted. The moment of their perfect love has been captured and preserved for all time. They have sat together in the same position all night, not stirring at all, and this, it seems, is the beginning of an eternity together. Again, the speaker tries to convince himself of the reader that what he has done is not to be condemned, for he says that even God has not spoken about his act, but he leaves it open that he is himself not absolutely sure of God's approval, as he says that yet God has not said a word. The poem's themes of sex, violence, and madness were of particular interest to Victorian readers who reveled in sensational tales of horror and depravity, despite societal condemnation of all things immoral. But Browning overturns normal expectations of such stories by presenting the sex between Porphyria and her lover as natural, making the reader consider the relationship between sex and violence and exploring the complex nature of the speaker's madness. The result is a study of human nature and morality that poses more questions than it provides answers. This widely anthologized poem is also considered one of the finest poetic explorations of criminal pathology, an early example of Browning's treatment of the theme of experiencing an infinite moment, an ironic reaction against the romantic idealization of love, and a work that shows a skilled use of lyricism to present the complex workings of a character's mind. Despite many positive social reforms, Victorian England was known also for its repressive attitude towards sexuality. Sexuality in the Victorian period was seen as taboo, not an appropriate subject of discussion. But paradoxically, while moral purity was the norm in public, sex during the Victorian era was a powerful force in journalism, art, and literature. Sexual scandals were the subject of numerous newspaper stories, and the reading public had a voracious appetite for tales of illicit affairs. Porphyria's Lover, written by Robert Browning around 1834, during the early days of the Victorian period, takes on a scandalous subject that would have been of interest to the reading public that ensures shocking and horrific tales of sexual transgression. However, in this poem, Browning does not merely feed his readers' need for scandal by describing a sordid crime enhanced by madness and violence, but shocks his audience even further and thus forces them to question their desire for sensational stories that both titillate and horrify them. Unfortunately for women, the double standards used to judge their sexual behavior in everyday life also found their way into the scandal sheets, and women suffered far more greatly than men if they were even rumored to be misbehaving sexually. A woman would lose her good name, be barred from society, and decried as fallen, and because she was usually so completely under the power of her husband, any transgression on her part could mean being outcast for the rest of her life. Another reason that Porphyria's Lover is interesting in the context of Victorian social life is that the poem presents a situation in which a woman dominates an illicit relationship, and the immorality of that relationship is then undercut by the horror of the murder that ensues. In the poem, Browning once again overturns his audience's expectations by presenting a twist on a scandalous subject that requires them to reconsider their attitudes towards sexuality, propriety, and morality.